Uganda aims to produce over 20 bags of coffee by 2030, following a 2017 directive by President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. As the leading coffee exporter in East Africa, Uganda relies on coffee as a key cash crop. To reach this goal, the National Coffee and Cocoa Research Institute, NACORI, has developed strategies to boost production.
The approaches that we needed to use, one was that to increase production in areas where coffee and cocoa are being produced. Two, increase production or introduce production in areas that usually do not produce coffee, that these are non-coffee traditional producing areas. These would increase areas of northern Uganda, that is Acholi, West Nile, Lango, Teso and Karamoja. And then another approach was that to increase the intensity, the yield per tree in the existing coffee gardens. That will mean rehabilitate, rejuvenate the coffee production, for example in central Uganda and Ankole, so that we can have more coffee per tree per year. Another approach was that to encourage large-scale production of coffee, that is increasing the number of large-scale producers in this country. Large-scale producer, we mean people who are planting 50 to 600 acres of coffee.
Coffee needs good management for high yields, says agronomist Kwakarona Winnie from NACORI. Both organic and inorganic fertilizers are important, and NPK is also recommended for coffee growing.
In coffee, we have mainly two types of fertilizers. We have the inorganic and organic fertilizers, whereby, of course, the two, one cannot replace the other. We always advise farmers to have both of them on board, because one cannot serve the purpose of the other. The inorganic fertilizers, why we recommend them, because they're slow releasing, and the crop will have the nutrients for a quite long time. Unlike the inorganic, which will be very fast, and the crop, of course, will absorb the nutrients very fast and respond accordingly. So in coffee, we recommend use of NPK, especially for the older crops. Of course, at planting, we shall use the DAP, but as the crop grows older, we use the NPK, and it depends on the stage of the crop. So for the quite young plants, like those below 1 year, we recommend you put at least 100 grams per tree. And the NPK blend is also quite different. You look at the NPK, which has more of the P for the root development and the N. So all these fertilizers, we get them from the Yaramira or the Green Pulse, depending what you need. For the old crop like this one, which is above 1 year, we use the NPK, which is either 25-55, but of course with other micronutrients, or use the NPK, which has 17 to 31 from Green Pulse. Mainly for the N, for the green coloring, and the K is for the formation of the fruits or the cherries. Why we need these fertilizers? First of all, this cherry needs to, we are all looking at a cherry or a berry which is big in size. So we look at screen 18, that's mostly highly marketable, and of course fetches more money for the farmers at the end of the day for the industry. So we need fertilizers to boost the size of the cherry and also increase production. You look at your crop, the last primary, that's the canopy. That's where the roots are, which are supposed to be feeding the crop. So here, when you look around this plant, you will see where the last primary is, and that's why you dig a small trench where you put your fertilizers. That's about 200 grams for an old tree like this one. You put 100 grams per tree after digging around the trench, and then you cover. If you have the inorganic fertilizers, the organic fertilizers, that's the well-decomposed cow dung, or the chicken droppings, or maybe the goat droppings, but as well as the well-decomposed, you put them around the canopy where the crop feeds from. So another thing, even when you're doing the mulching in your field, besides the fertilizers, any mulch that you put should be at the canopy, should not cross inside there. And when to apply it, we always recommend at least once every year for the organic fertilizers, as the composite fertilizers, at least once a year. Then for the inorganic fertilizers, the NPK, we recommend 2 times a year. And 2 times only when it has rained. We only apply fertilizers after the soils are well moist, so they can easily be absorbed by the plant. Then for the mulches, of course, like any other field, we do mulching in the fields to maintain the soil moisture in the soil, to avoid the soil erosion and control weeds in the field. Then, of course, after having your fertilizers in the field, you need to have trenches or ditches in the fields, so to avoid the soil erosion. So when your fertilizers are placed in here and it comes to rain, it can easily wash out all your fertilizers. So you need to have some trenches in the fields that will control the runoffs of the rain. And maybe what I will not forget is when you're putting your trenches, you need to know from each trench to other, how do you determine the distance? That will depend on the steepness of your field. So if it is quite steep, you will use either the F frame or H frame to determine the distance from one trench to another. And how to dig up the trenches, they're also having recommended spacings and length, of course, with the tie bands, not forgetting the tie bands in the trenches. Then on the management of this crop, as Dr. already mentioned, even when you apply these fertilizers, make sure you have at least 3 or 4 stems of the plant. Otherwise, whatever you'll be feeding the crop, the other branches which are not even beneficial will be taking up the nutrients, and at the end of the day, you'll be wasting up your nutrients or your fertilizers, which are very expensive. So as you look at that plant there, we have just done the suckering. So you remove all the excess branches, so that the crop, you just leave only the 4 branches which will benefit from the nutrients which you would have applied. And maybe to also mention, for a plant like this, you look at the primary. If the bearing head is less than 1 meter, you need to do stamping.
After about 7 to 10 years, depending on the performance of your coffee crop, stamping is necessary to maintain productivity, explains agronomist Kwakaroni. This practice helps rejuvenate the coffee trees and improve future yields.
So at about 7 years or 10 years, depending on how your crop has been doing, you need to cut out stamping. And stamping, you cut this tree at least a foot from the ground. A foot from the ground. You stamp from here. Then the sucker that will come from here, you pick at least half a foot from the main branch. So from there, you pick the best 4 suckers or the best 4 stems. 3 to 4 stems that you will maintain as they grow up the next subsequent years. So the next 5 years or 7 years, you can still do the stamping. So stamping is basically to just rejuvenate the crop and it comes up afresh. Yes, because it would have reached that end of the cycle. There are some farmers who don't want to use the inorganic fertilizers. Well, it's okay. Use the organic fertilizers, use the decomposed fertilizers and put them in your field. And you put at least a benson on each tree, at least once a year. Depending, if you see the need is there, then you can apply twice. Or you can apply maybe 2 bensons. But the recommended is 1 benson per plant each year. That's if you're using the organic fertilizers. Once you've done all the practices, all the recommended agronomic practices, you will have high yield. And for each of these varieties, each of them has a different potential. We're ranging from 2.5 tons per hectare to 4 tons per hectare, depending on the variety that you have in your field. For a crop, for as long as you manage it well, the first treatment line of pest and disease is management. Once you feed the crop well, it will be healthy. And anything that is healthy, even when the pests and diseases come, it will fight back. So it will have the stability to resist the pest and disease attack. So the more you have the agronomic practices in, the better for the crop. In coffee management, the suckering is very important. Because now, if you see these extra suckers, the crop is going to compete for nutrients, for light, and of course, it can also harbor the pests and diseases at the end of the day. Then it will affect the yield of the entire crop. So here, you make sure you remove all these excess branches that are growing on the tree by using secateurs. These are secateurs, and they're sold in most of the agro input shops. So you don't use a panga, because at the end of the day, you might end up injuring the plant, and that will be a source of inoculum for the pathogens. So here you make sure you remove all these and have your plant as clean as possible, and maintain only the 4 branches that you have. So all these are supposed to be removed. And also remember, as the crop grows, the years I mentioned about before doing the stamping, all these are supposed to be removed. This was previously primary, which had the cherries, and it's now off. They have finished harvesting. So the crop keeps on growing up to the up. So if this distance from here to the tip, if it's less than 1 meter, then you have to do the stamping. So you just know this crop, even if you put all the fertilizer you talked about, the manure, it will not yield to the potential. So you have to do the stamping of this particular crop like this. So here we have to do all this. Yes, this is due for stamping, but we're just still collecting on some data, then we remove it. So you make sure you cut as close as possible to the branch, as close as possible to the main branch. So that you can have light penetrate through your crop or your plant to avoid the pests and disease.
In the early 1990s and 2000s, Robusta coffee in Uganda was severely affected by coffee wilt disease, first reported in Bundibujo. As you manage your coffee plantation, it's important therefore to stay vigilant against pests and diseases which can help reduce yields and damage trees. Early detection and proper control measures are key to maintaining a healthy crop.
The country produces two kinds of coffee, Robusta coffee and Arabica coffee. 80% is Robusta, 20% is Arabica. But in the early 1990s and the 2000s, the Robusta coffee industry was challenged by a disease called coffee wilt disease. And this disease was first reported in Uganda in Bundibujo in 1993. And after that, it spread to all the Robusta growing regions, killing almost 50% of the Robusta coffee. And this disease can't be controlled using chemicals. Farmers who were narrow was encouraging farmers to use sanitary methods whereby they uproot and burn, but this is labor intensive. So as the industry, we had to come up with a solution, and the only solution was to breed for resistant lines. So the research institute started developing resistant varieties, and in 2009 we released the first 7 coffee resistant varieties. Recently in 2017 we released more 3. So currently we have 10 varieties which are resistant to the coffee wilt disease. But also in the Arabica section, because 20% of our coffee is Arabica, and worldwide Arabica is more profitable compared to Robusta. So as the institute, we are about to release 3 varieties in Arabica coffee, which are short, therefore they are gender sensitive, and they have very good quality compared to the local ones we have now. Okay, for the Robusta, they are called the KRs, or Chituza Robusta. And we have Chituza Robusta 1 up to Chituza Robusta 10. And these are high yielding, but the best attribute they have is that they are resistant to the coffee wilt disease. Farmers out there are still trying out their local varieties, and also we had the 6 commercials we had released before then, but all of them succumb to coffee wilt disease. So my advice to them is to plant the resistant varieties, and the best source where to get them is the National Coffee Research Institute. But we are also working with our sister institutes in Naro, which we call the Zonal Agricultural Research Organizations. And also we have several research ambassadors we are going to work with, and this will help us to produce enough material to supply the country. For the diseases I've told you, it's the coffee wilt, which is we haven't controlled it because the uptake of the new variety is still low, but it's increasing every time. At least in Chituza every day we get a lot of demand for these varieties. But there is also another disease which is also becoming a very big challenge. It's called the red blister, and as the name sounds, it causes the berries to become red. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information on this disease, not only in Uganda, but worldwide. So currently, we have a number of students who are studying this disease. We need to know its epidemiology. We need to know how it's spread. We need to know whether we are working with one strain. So there are a number of studies we really need to know before we start managing it. At first we thought it was a nutritional problem, whereby if you enhance nutrition, you could control this disease. But we see that we know where there is no shade, where there is shade, and where the nutrition is good, at least the incidence is a little bit controlled, but also not managed. So we need to come up with the management options for this disease. They are reporting this disease, and they have even Uganda, why is it? They call it chikata in Uganda, and the chikata is like the blister. So for us, we are telling them at least to apply fertilizers and also shade to their coffee. At least that reduces the incidence of the disease. But we still need to come up with. We have tried all chemicals. I was in a coffee in a coffee conference, and I got some fungicide. They told me they use it in Kenya and it controls, but we are yet to try it. But most of the fungicides we have tried in Uganda, they don't work. So, but to us people who deal with the pests and diseases, we know you first need to know how the pest or disease interacts with the environment before you can really come up with an effective control method.
Farmers are encouraged to practice intercropping as it helps manage pests and diseases. However, it can also increase risks, so proper spacing is key, as Dr. Godfrey Kagezi, an entomologist at Nakori in Kituza, explains.
First of all, intercropping, we encourage farmers to do intercropping because it has so many advantages. It can manage some of the pests and diseases, but also, unfortunately, it can also promote some pests and diseases. So you need to come up with an optimal spacing. That's why we usually tell farmers to follow our recommended spacing. If your coffee is your main crop, you plant at 3 by 3, and then for bananas at 6 by 6, so that you maintain the recommended distances. But some farmers are doing the close spacing. The close spacing will also promote another pest. If you can see there are a lot of suckers. The plant is not desuckered, and you see some branches, and these are called the primaries. They are drying. It's because of another pest which is called the black coffee tube borer. And now this one is one of the biggest challenge to our coffee now in Uganda. It was also first reported at the same time at the coffee field and in the same district of Bundibujo. But now it has spread on all the coffees. What I forgot to tell you is that the coffee field, the strain we have in Uganda, doesn't affect our Arabica coffee. But in other countries like Ethiopia, it goes also for what? For Arabica coffee. But for the twig borer, the pest, it goes for both. But it loves Robusta coffee than Arabica coffee. And as narrow, we have come up with a trap which uses alcohol or ethanol to attract these insects. We attract them and we kill them. We would be, but there are also challenges. The first challenge, I think everybody knows it, are funds. I think for me, all researchers, we have a lot in our heads, because even if we don't know, you just read literature. Literature now is everywhere, and these pests are not. They are not only here; they are worldwide. So we need to copy what's there, and we modify it, and we see how we control. So we need funds, but also we need scientists For example, I'm the only entomologist working on pests, and a few students who are doing mostly their work. So I have to run up and down. Even when you look at other the breeders, if I give you an example of Brazil, I've been in Brazil. You look at their research institute. One discipline, there are about 200 researchers. When you talk of entomology, there are so many disciplines of entomology: ecology, biology, management. When you go like to Isipe, Kenya, so many scientists. So the black coffee tree borer the female makes a tiny hole, usually on the primary, but also on the soft stems. And it lays its eggs, and after laying the eggs, they hatch, and then they fly out, and then they go and infest. So what it causes, the tree wilts first, then it dries, and that means the farmer is losing all the what, all his harvest, because they attack the primary producing twigs. And there are conditions which this BCTB is promoted, especially by bushness. You see this? There are a lot of suckers. These suckers are not removed, so they create conducive conditions for BCTB to develop. So in managing, first of all, the farmers, they have to desucker. They have to remove all these suckers. Then they have to inspect their fields. And whenever they see any wilting, they look for this tiny hole. When they see this tiny hole, then that's an insect. So there you don't uproot and burn, because the wilting is almost the same as the coffee wilt. But here, in this case, there is a hole. So what you need to do is to get a secateur and cut and remove the infested material. But after removing, you burn. Usually what farmers do, they have like a sack, they go, they cut, they put in the sack, and then they burn. And then also, I talked about shade management. The shade, we need also to manage the shade. When it's too much shade, although coffee loves shade, but as I said, sometimes it also promotes pests and diseases. And this is one of the pests which is promoted by too much shade. So farmers have also to manage the shade.
Experts advise farmers to plant shade trees in their coffee garden as they help improve soil health and protect coffee plants from extreme weather. Specific recommendations are given on which tree species are best suited for this purpose.
Coffee is a shade-loving plant because it came from the forest. In fact, when you look at our forests, we have the richest biodiversity of coffee. So we have to maintain coffee in that environment. So we advise farmers to plant shade trees. But they shouldn't just plant shade trees. We have recommended shade trees depending on the region where you are. For example, Mugavu, for example, Mutuba, Nongo, these are good shade trees to be planted. But there are 3 shade trees I'm going to discourage farmers from putting them into their coffee. The Musizi, the Musambia, and what we call Albizia chinensis, which is common in Mukono and Ruwero. These trees have been good trees, but they promote the black coffee twig borer. So we are discouraging farmers from putting them there. I know farmers attach a lot of advantages, other economic advantages to trees. If they want them, they can put them on the boundaries, or they can create woodlots for them.
Let's pay close attention to all the recommended management practices to achieve better yields as advised by the experts. In our next episode, we will hear from the Director Nakori on the strategies being used to boost coffee and cocoa production in Uganda. Let's pay close attention to all the recommended management practices to achieve better yields as advised by the experts.